for.
So there we go.
All right. Thank you so much, Colin, for that introduction. And before I dive further, I'd like to also introduce my co-host, Susan. Susan, do you want to quickly introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, hi everybody. Happy to be here with all of you and with Dr. Jose.
All right.
I'll be chatting later.
All right. Susan did a great job for this presentation, and we can dive into the presentation. Now, next slide. Before I talk about the learning objectives, I just want to set a context. Now, the Canadian Medical Association in the Canadian Physician Health Survey of last year revealed that 1 in 2 physicians have burnout. And the Mayo Clinic proceeding study revealed that the competence of a physician leader, which means the ability to make decisions, manage conflict, and communicate, can influence the mental and emotional well-being of the physicians they lead, and eventually the burnout risk of physicians under them. This means that when physician leaders are well emotionally regulated and develop the skill of self-command, they can influence the physician burnout prevalence rate that is very alarming, as seen in the Canadian Medical Association Physician Health Survey. This is why what we are going to share in this webinar is crucial. The techniques and the tools we'll be sharing would help physician leaders to improve their competence. I would like to give honor to whom it is due. The things I'll be sharing, techniques, I learned them from Shamin Shazad. He's the founder of Positive Intelligence. I went through his program, learned a couple of things, and also some of the things that I've learned from my own personal transformation, from guiding my clients, and from being certified in wellness and well-being by the International Coaching Federation and the American Council on Exercise. These are the places I've learned, and I'll be sharing some of the things I've learned along the way. For the objectives, we'll be talking about self-command and why it matters for physician leaders. Then we'll outline how physician leaders can lose themselves under pressure without even recognizing it, and would highlight 3 practical tools rather, that support composure, clarity, and self-command. Next slide. When physician leaders are under pressure, they don't lose competence, they lose access to it. The thing is, when they are not properly emotionally regulated, right, they are on automaticity and they lose that executive function, which I'll be explaining in upcoming slide. That's why developing the skill of self-command is very crucial, so that physicians can always assess their competence when they need it the most. Next slide. Now, why physician leaders can lose themselves? As we all know, based on my own experience working in the healthcare sector, the healthcare sector anywhere in the world is complex, and physician leaders carry a lot of clinical and administrative burdens. They have also lots of responsibilities, high accountability, without full control most times. Some of the things that happen in the healthcare system, they're not within their full control. And they are constantly exposed to emotional tensions and pressure from the system. This means, as physician leaders, that when you are striving to be competent, we need to develop our internal capacity and not just our clinical and any form of administrative expertise we have. The internal capacity will help physician leaders to tap into that expertise or competence that they have. Now, we'd like to run a poll to get a sense of the physician leaders that are currently attending this webinar and assess their level of experience. So please, I would like you to participate in this poll and let's know your years of physician leadership experience. I can see lots of participants already. Thank you for obliging. So just run the poll for a few seconds.
You've got 90% of people responded already.
Okay. All right.
I think
Okay.
we're,
All
there
right.
we go.
Okay. And now from the poll, we can see that more than precisely 68% of physician leaders here have more than 5 years experience. Then 13% have 30% are physician leadership coach. Then 22% have 2 to 5 years experience, and 4% have less than 1 year experience. That means we have the major bulk of physician leaders we have attend this webinar, they have more than 5 years of experience. Okay, next slide.
One moment, please. Cut the results in the way.
Okay. Now, in this slide, we're trying to explain the neurophysiology of chronic stress and comparing it with the regulated brain, which is the outcome we're trying to get from this webinar. How can we get the brain and the physiology of physician leaders regulated such that it will reduce automaticity which most times is what an unregulated brain would default to. When we are stressed, the signal starts from the amygdala. Amygdala is the sensor, the emotional sensor in the brain. And when the amygdala senses that our safety is threatened or we are not safe, it sends signals to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sends signals to the pituitary gland. Then the pituitary gland sends signals to the adrenal glands. Depending on how immediate or how threatened or the state, there can be an immediate sympathetic nervous system overdrive, or the adrenal cortex will be stimulated to release cortisol. When cortisol is released and it reaches a specific threshold, this is where the issues will come in. Now, when cortisol reaches that threshold, it can affect the prefrontal cortex. This is the region in the brain where clear logical thinking and executive functions occur. Cortisol will reduce that cognitive processes that occur in the prefrontal cortex. Then also in the hippocampus, when cortisol level is very high, because of there are two ways. It can be sudden stimulation, or most times the dangerous part is the silent stimulation, because most times they're not aware that they are always in a chronically stressed state, and that will cause a continuous pulsatile release of cortisol, which will affect the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus area, and cause other forms of neural disruptions. Compare that to the right hand side of the image, the regulated brain. When our brain is regulated and the amygdala is always calm because we are taking self command, the amount of cortisol released will not be high enough. That threshold will not be there enough to affect the executive functions in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. Just to clarify, the hippocampus is where memory, recall, and other things occur. And we need all these things when we're trying to solve a problem as physician leader, when we're trying to make a decision, or when we're trying to manage conflict. We need to tap into our previous memory or experiences to discern and solve a problem. But when all these things are impaired because of chronic stress or overstimulation, these things will affect the overall competence or the access to the competence by an unregulated brain in a physician leader. Now, we'll be talking about later in this webinar the specific tools that would help physician leaders to regulate their brain. Next slide. When pressure rises, what shows up? It differs for each person. It depends on a lot of factors. It depends on the intensity of the threat or when your safety is threatened. So, for example, for some people, it can be urgency, right? That's when there's an intense sympathetic nervous system stimulation. That's the fight, or you flight. Fight or flight response, you flee. For some people, it could be frustration when there is so much pressure, they're frustrated. For some people, they withdraw or they freeze. That's the freeze response. As an intense sympathetic nervous system stimulation. So there's the for the there are, in the autonomic nervous system, there's a sympathetic arm and a parasympathetic arm. The sympathetic arm is responsible for our safety and to help us survive. The parasympathetic arm is responsible for logical thinking, the rest and digest response. Most times, when we are chronically stressed, there is a sympathetic nervous system overdrive. And for some people, when they are stressed, that's what we call saboteur. I'll explain that in the next slide. But saboteurs are the protective sub-personalities we develop when we are trying to when we try to survive during our developmental years. And an over-controlling response is a sign of a saboteur managing the person, not the person managing the saboteur. I'll explain in the next slide. Then for some people, it could be an outburst. For example, I remember then when I was in practice, we had a very tough time in the private practice. We had a very tough patient load. The hospital admin was on my neck. I remember snapping at one of the nurses. And when I got back to my office, I felt this emotional tension. I felt guilty. And I didn't understand why I was feeling guilty. But each time I remember that context or that scenario, I know why now, right? It was my core self that was trying to communicate something to me that, Chris, why did you snap at her? This is not who you are, right? Those inner dialogues come in, and that's part of being human. So I'd like to know in the chat, can you put in chat, have you ever snapped at a colleague and you felt guilty? Can you type me too or yes? Or can you type in the chat if you had that response, snapping at somebody or doing something you regret because of so much pressure and you felt guilty? Okay. Sean is saying absolutely. Yes. So I can get some responses and yes from Marilyn. It's part of being human. And you have to understand, okay, where's this inner dialogue coming from? I'll explain that in the next slide. So next. Thanks for your responses. Next slide. Now, let's talk about what we call the self-command. What does it mean? Self-command. Now, self-command this is my own understanding after learning from Charmaine Shazad. Self-command simply means is the ability to, so there's some keywords. You are proactively and intentionally controlling your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions rather than being controlled by your thoughts and your emotional impulses. So the thing is, it's a skill. It's learnable when you have the right tools and when you have the right techniques. You can learn self-command. Why is it dormant for most physician leaders? Most times it's because of lack of self-awareness on the what I call the inner dynamics. For most humans, if not all humans, but I don't want to say all humans, we all have what we call parts. And in internal family systems terminology, we have a core self. The core self is the calm, the wise, and the aligned sub-personality that helps us make sure that whatever we do is aligning with our values and our purpose and our goals. We all have that personality that guides us, like our conscience. Then in the another sub-personality, we have what we call the saboteurs or the parts. Saboteurs are, like I said, they are the sub-personalities we develop during our developmental years when we're trying to gain approval or any form of compliments from the people we love, the people we expect that from the most, which is our parents. When we don't receive that unconditional love and acceptance, most times we develop a saboteur. It's a sub-personality. One of the ways to explain this psychological dynamics is like a parent going on a road trip with his or her kids. So you're on a road trip, you have a predetermined destination you are going to, and you have your kids at the back. So for example, the parent has 3 kids. The 3 kids represent the sub-personalities. The parents on the driver's seat, and the parent knows the destination they are going to. Sometimes the kids can have chit chats. They can make suggestions about the trip, but the parents can smile and be aware of what the kids are saying, but that doesn't alter the destination. That destination has been predetermined, and that's the core self. The core self is predetermined when you have done some inner work with yourself. It can be done alone or with a professional. You have defined it by labeling the sub personalities and externalizing them. So in NLP, it's called perceptual positioning, whereby whenever you're having an inner dialogue, you know which part is talking, and you can make a decision based on your core self because you have externalized it. Now, for saboteurs, there are different types of saboteurs, but I will name the common one and the ones common amongst physician leaders. Now, the first one is the judge. When we are finding fault with ourselves or with others, the judge saboteur is controlling the person. The next one is the stickler. The stickler is a sub personality that wants things perfect. If it's not perfect, they don't like that environment. The next one is the hyper rational. Hyper rational is a saboteur that is over analytical. They over analyze everything, and that can cause paralysis. Another saboteur is the avoider. They can avoid facing tough decision making context. Another one is the controller. They want to dominate, they want to control and bend people's thoughts and actions to fit theirs. So these are examples of saboteurs. So the thing is, it's not saboteurs are not bad. It's just being aware of it, notice it, and don't allow it to control you. So, there are tools that Susan will be sharing later on that will guide you to become aware and have that self-command, which means not allowing that saboteur to guide, to control you. Now, we'll be doing a specific poll where in this poll, I would like you to just take some few seconds to reflect which or what is your primary saboteur from the list in this poll, the primary saboteur that you have when you're under pressure. Do you have the judge saboteur, or do you have the controller, the stickler, the hyper rational, the hyperachiever? So I would like you to just take a few seconds to participate and complete this poll. The essence of this poll is to build self-awareness of the possible saboteurs that you might have under pressure. It could be the judge, fault finding in yourself or with others. It could be the controller. You want to dominate, control. It could be the hyper vigilant. You're always monitoring and checking things. It could be the hyper rational. You are over analytical about things. Or the hyper achiever. You want external validation, usually under pressure. Or the stickler. You want things perfect, right? These are not bad sub personalities, but you need to be aware of them, because when you're not aware of it, you can default to these saboteurs and it can affect your competence as a physician leader. Okay. So 90% have participated. So we're still waiting for more participation before we round off this poll. It's an interesting result because we have a tie. And 2%. So in the next few minutes, we would round off this poll because of time.
I think you've reached your maximum at this
Okay,
point.
the maximum. Okay, all right. Now, from this poll, there are two dominant saboteurs under pressure: the hyperachiever, 26%, and the controller, right? Like I said, let's not feel bad about it. We have to be aware of it and know that, oh, when I'm under pressure, these are the saboteurs I display. Next slide.
Just 1 sec.
Now, what does the research say about the role of self or emotional regulation, how it improves performance and burnout. A couple of research published in JAMA and other publications have shown that mindfulness, which means present moment focus, attention, it improves executive function because you're not focusing on the saboteur, you are trying to choose where you want to focus on. Because what you focus on can influence the energy. Because when you are focused on the saboteur, it can signal to the amygdala that you're not safe. Remember, safety is a signal to the amygdala. When you're focusing on the saboteur, the amygdala would sense it and it can trigger slowly the HP axis for chronic stress. But when you are mindful, you are aware of the saboteur, then you choose to focus on your core self. That can reduce the signals sent to the amygdala. Next, when we are emotionally regulated, we make better decisions because we are making decisions based on our core self, not on our saboteur. Then leaders that are properly regulated, they have healthier and well resilient team members, and that can influence patient safety and the teams under them. Now, at this point, I would like to pass the baton over to Susan to continue the rest of the presentation. Susan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to cover some of the tools that Chris has mentioned. As he had mentioned, he comes from a wealth of education and background on mental health and some of these tools through the positive intelligence. I've also been working in healthcare for many years prior to my actual healthcare experience, and the wellness element has also been a part of my work. So I focus that in my day-to-day as well as in my coaching. So I'm happy to cover some of these tools. And I want to preface it also by saying it's probably not unlikely that you in the room who have a vast amount of experience in life and in work understand and already absorb these tools. So what I think is the element I want to focus on is when life gets busy, when the demands are high and challenges, what are the elements that we're forgetting about? How are we connecting, as Chris said, to that core self? What is it that we need to remember and do? So I really want to start with leading yourself before leading others. Chris has already talked about the impact that our saboteurs can have on our leadership and well-being, and also that the research is clear that self-awareness is foundational to effective leadership. I also was thinking of additional research that I think you have been exposed to is the LEADS framework in a caring environment. So I know CSPL had some training in that. And if you think about it, or if you don't know about it, LEADS is lead self is at the starting point. So they also have focused that as a primary element of before being a leader, it's your own self-awareness and what that's required. And that one was also focused specifically on healthcare. The other research was emotional intelligence. I'm certified emotional intelligence. I know others in the room are, and it's a great place to also think about how self-perception and self-awareness underpins so many other aspects of our emotional intelligence. And that was research conducted by Ruben Baron, and most people actually know the Daniel Goleman work, but it's been heavily researched and continues to be researched. So I think that that's a good demonstration of the importance of that self-employment or self-awareness. So the other piece that Chris has already referred to once, but I think what's really important about all of this research is that these are all capabilities that we can learn. So that self-awareness, and we'll talk about some of the other pieces, these are things that we can work on and develop and become better at. So even though we all have our saboteurs, we can also balance that with the other mindsets that we go into. So the three core tools that I just want to briefly talk about is self-awareness of how do we interrupt the stress loop, self-regulation. Once we've identified and interrupted the stress loop, what are the other pieces we can do to regain composure? And also the third piece was how do we get insight and change? So we identify things, we can compose in the moment, but what's the final more sustaining change that we can make. And that is through one example is through leadership coaching. And as I said, many of you already understand a lot of these tools, but we really want to be thinking about who our saboteurs are and how do we access the core self to make us more effective. So this is where we get to participate. What I'd like to invite you to do is find a pen and paper. And we're going to just have a brief reflection. If you don't have pen and paper, whatever way you take your notes would be fabulous. And I'm just going to explain it and then I'll show you what we're doing. So as I mentioned, under the stress of the moment, long hours, challenging, possibly burnout, either for yourself or your team, there are moments when we're not at our best. We have all been there, perhaps in recent mind. So maybe some examples: as a leader, you've requested an increase in resources, you received what you think might be unreasonable pushback. Maybe you had to follow and implement a change that you didn't agree with. So now your role as a leader is like, I'm not on board. How do I then filter this to and get my team to embrace this change? So those are some examples that I see a lot in leaders. But the question for this is, who are you in that moment? So we're talking here about interrupting the stress loop. So I've given some examples, but I'd like to invite you to think about a time recently, or that's very current in your brain, that you had a challenging situation, perhaps one in which your response was less than favorable. As Chris said, maybe it's a moment you snapped. What was that reaction that you didn't really intend to? So here are the questions to reflect on for a moment. What happened to you in that moment? What were the factors that influenced your reaction? I'm going to just find that if we write things down, it stays more current and real for us. Just like you take a moment to write something down. The next question is, what were the signs for you that you'd been triggered? Chris explained all of the amygdala hijack and so on. So it's, what is that trigger? What are the physiological changes that you noticed for yourself? You know, some people it's the sweaty palms. I get a red face. We have many different ways that we react, and it's about noticing those in the moment. So what were the physiological changes for you? And the other question is, what was the impact on your ability to manage the situation? What was the impact on your ability to lead effectively? If you want to put a summary of that in the chat, if you're comfortable to share any of that. So maybe what are the triggers, or what was the impact it had on you as a leader? So noticing those and that self-awareness, as I mentioned, sometimes we just get so carried away with the world that we don't notice what's going on. And the intent here is to interrupt the stress loop. So there are many different ways we can do this. The one I'm going to be talking about is, first of all, notice the moment before you take action, before you react. We notice the physiological signs first before it connects to our body tells us, before our brain tells us. So we're sometimes reacting and we're not noticing unless we're tuned in to what our body is telling us. The other tool is, were your impulses driven by an internal narrative or by objective facts? So we often drive ourselves on perception. So one very simple example is, I'm on a street and I see my best friend on the other side of the street. Maybe we've just had an argument the day before and they don't acknowledge me. I get upset, thinking, you know, here's our relationship gone. What have I done? I'm taking it personally. I'm getting upset in turn. If we look at the facts versus the story, we can start to unpeel those. And this all happens so quickly in our brain. So sometimes it's How do you plan this maybe before a challenging conversation, or you've reacted? How do you unpack it afterwards? When you get really good at it, maybe you'll unpack it in the moment. But it's really about pulling out the facts. What are those objective facts? And what was your internal narrative? I always call it your story. So those are often driven by our assumptions, our biases, interpretations, emotions, and so on. And when you are, sorry, lost my slide. When you are thinking about that, so let's say my assumption of that friend crossing the street, I'm assuming that it's because they're mad at me. Whereas if I look at the plain facts, the facts are they didn't see me or they just didn't respond. So it could be that they didn't see me. It could be that they're mad, but I am creating a story for myself and my reactions based on an assumption. Maybe it's a bias. You know, somebody told me another person was a poor performer. And so when I work with them, I go in with that bias of poor performance, and maybe I start to react and work with them in a way that maybe not be productive. So that is the one element of how do you interrupt that stress is how do you bring out your story and the facts, and how do you notice what is going on physiologically. The next tool is self-regulation. So now we know that something is happening. What are the elements we can do to control it? There are a number of these. The one I'm going to focus on today is about vagal tone, because the vagal nerve, as most of you know, helps regulate digestion, heart rate, the body's ability to get into a calm, restorative state. It's become a real interest in clinical research. It also controls our breathing. So research is showing us that we can improve vagal tone by practicing our breathing techniques. Chris had mentioned before about mindfulness. This may be part of your mindfulness practice. It may be part of your yoga or any other practice you have. What's interesting in the research I was reading is that you want your exhalation to be longer than your inhalation. When you breathe out, that your heart rate decreases and you stimulate the vagal nerve. So you'll know, as I mentioned, the physiological changes, we're probably breathing from our shoulders and our upper body. So how do you stimulate the vagal nerve to stop that, to increase the sympathetic activity? So again, I'd like you to participate in this. I'm guessing everybody's had a long day. It's a long evening. I'd like to invite you to sit upright. Put your feet flat on the ground and get in tune with where your body is. Notice what's happening for you physiologically. I'm going to, normally it's suggested 10 breaths. I'm going to suggest we abbreviate it to 6. Okay, sorry. So what I'd like you to do is focus on, in the first 2 breaths, focus on what's going on in your mind right now. And don't try to do anything about it. As you go through the other breaths, think about what's going on in your body. So let's just go through a couple of those breaths. We may not have time for 6, but I'd like to invite you to at least do it. So if you want to close your eyes or lower your eyes, I'm going to count up and then down. So we'll do 6 up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and hold for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top. 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do just one more. As you're noticing, this is the time to think about what is your whole body? What is the messaging your body is giving you? So counting, breathing in to 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4, 3, 2, 1. And exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you for doing that. You can come back to the room. I'd like to invite you, if you are so inspired, to put something in the chat of what did you notice about your breathing? What did you notice about what happened after those breaths? Was there a calmness? Did you notice what was happening in your body? Okay, so there are people whose feet felt more grounded, jaw tension relaxed. Excellent, yeah. So sometimes I bet you would, before you wrote that, you didn't even notice that you needed calming down. And so after a long day, that is not atypical to be needing that rest. The other one, actually, sorry, I wanted to go back. The other one that I didn't have time for is the pause, reframe, and respond. But I also wanted to mention in this one, there's a cognitive ability in this. So as Chris said, your executive function can get hijacked. So it's not in the game anymore. And one way of doing it is to engage your cognitive functioning. So if you remember, if you were of the generation where mom told you to count to 10 before you got mad, it actually now is based on research that if we do math or we count, we're re-engaging the executive function. So maybe you just say, okay, I'm noticing this is going on. 2 + 2 is 4. Whatever it is, or count backwards from 10. That will re-engage your cognitive reasoning and give you that moment, that pause, even multiplied, added to the breath, to help you regain some self-composure. The last piece that I'm going to be covering is the last tool is professional coaching. So if you think about perhaps yourself and all those things that we've talked about, maybe you're very aware of all of these things, but you've changed or you've tried to change, and life keeps carrying you away, and you're not able to change persistent behavior or thoughts. And especially on your own, like we can reflect, we can do all these things, but what's going to create that sustained change? Research has shown us that people persist in doing what they've always done because, as Chris referred to, our brain keeps us in our comfort zone. When it predicts failure or is trying to do something different, the fight or flight kicks in. And we resist trying to change. As most coaches will know, and if you've been doing your own learning and development, it's when you're learning something new, it's really uncomfortable. We can feel really awkward, and it's really easy to give it up. So the thing with the assumptions and biases we discussed earlier, those thoughts are also hard to change without perhaps somebody to engage in a conversation with you. I'm not sure if you're familiar with John Dewey. He's an educational reformer, which I thought this was very apropos for a physician group, that the most intelligent people need the most help thinking about their thinking. So because they're very good at rationalizing, we are very good at rationalizing, and that's that rationalizing that doesn't help us change the behavior. So introducing coaching here as an alternative, because a good coach can help you with thought disruption. It can be holding up a mirror. It can be challenging those moments of when you want to change, but you're not comfortable changing, of helping you, questioning you, holding that safe space for you to challenge yourself and think of alternatives. It's a safe space. Often people will find that just having an objective ear gives them that place to be able to speak to what's going on and not feel judged, and being able to challenge their ways of thinking or their mindsets. This example I picked here was, so it says insight creates awareness and coaching creates change. And I fell in love with this butterfly and its metamorphosis, because butterflies do go through this, and through coaching and through all the self-awareness, all the things that we've talked about, this is where change happens. So just wanted to put that forward. I do love butterflies too. And just to talk a little bit about CPCN, who has partnered with CSPL in this lovely opportunity that we have together. And I'm sure many of you already know that CPCN is a not-for-profit, and that we're collaborating with CSPL for 2 webinars and 2 podcasts this year as a trial. We have a network of highly skilled coaches that offer coaching for physicians of any level. And you have the ability many times, if you'd like, to go onto our coaches directory and find a coach and have a free, often they will offer a free complimentary session just to have a conversation to see what the connection is, if coaching is the right thing for you. Often there might be a description between what is mentoring versus coaching versus therapy, because there are fine lines for those. So you can reach into the CPCN directory, and I'll show you the link in a moment, just to tap into that wealth of resources for yourself. And our website will also give you more information on that. So those are the 3 tools. So again, it's that self-awareness, the self-regulation, and then insight to change through coaching. And all of those hopefully will support what Chris was talking about, being aware of the saboteurs and connecting to that core self of yours that will make a difference. Chris, I'm passing back over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Susan, for your wonderful presentation. So like we've shared, and she has shared as well, like these tools will guide us to properly develop the skill of self-command. When we have built that skill, and skill, self-command, like any other skill, is built on repetition. When you use these tools repeatedly, you gain the skill of self-command. And as a physician leader, you would make better decisions. You build stronger trust amongst your team members, and that reduces burnout for yourself and also for your team members, because regulated leaders create resilient and healthier team members. Next. Now, the health system is complex. You have clinical and administrative responsibilities. Most times, pressure is typically inevitable, but you can learn self-command because it's a skill. With tiny practices developed over time, it compounds to a larger leadership impact. So we'd like to invite you to explore the CPCN link below and find a coach you want to work with, and see how you can use that tool. If that tool is what you want to use that tool to build the skill of self-command. So this is the link for the CPCN. Next slide. As a wrap-up, what's the number 1 insight and tool that you want to tap into to help you lead differently this week rather? Someone once said that let every education lead to a behavior change. I believe we've been able to give you the insights and the tools. So we'd like you to just reflect for a few seconds based on the insights we've shared so far and the tools my co-host has shared. What 1 insight and tool would I try and experiment with to lead differently this week? So we'll leave that answer to you. Now, next slide.
Do you want to share it in the chat if anybody is interested in sharing that insight or tool that you're committed to learning? That'd be great to see. So this is the QR code, but maybe we can take some questions first before we jump into that, Chris.
Sure. All right. If you have any questions regarding what we just shared, feel free to drop in the chat, or you can unmute and ask your questions. So we're happy to answer them.
And I will drop the QR code in. Sorry, I changed. That's for the evaluation.
So that's the
Yeah.
post-webinar evaluation. So you can scan the QR code to start the evaluation. So please, do you have any questions?
Thank you for the comments in the chat.
Yeah. As we are still expecting any questions.
Okay, maybe I'll while everybody's thinking about maybe some questions, I'll just take us to the last slide.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions there. Let me just, before we go into that, then finish this piece, because I wanted to just make sure. So Chris and I thank you all, and we have our details on the slide if you're interested in reaching out. And I wanted to point out that we've mentioned their webinars and podcasts as part of the series. And Dr. Salima Shamshi and Dr. Cecile Andreas are going to be engaging us in a podcast in the near future. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to take my screen off, Chris, and then we can answer some questions.
All right. Charlene, okay, she's still typing, I guess.
So Ellen was also asking how many of you, I assume that's to the broader audience, Ellen, aware of the difference between fact and story? That's a great question. I am curious too. Is that something that is a common understanding? Crucial conversations, yes. Thank you, Matthew. Okay. All right, thank you. I guess we're not having any questions. Last call for questions. Any comments you want to offer?
I'd like to say that thank you both for the excellent presentation. I think it brought a lot of things to limelight that we as physicians take for granted. In our day-to-day work, even as physicians or leaders, we do have difficult situations. You have to make decisions on the fly right away. Even though decision may not be very comfortable with everybody. One thing I've learned is I try to listen to everybody. And within the context of listening to everybody, I'll get my answers to what I need to do. But giving everybody an opportunity to speak their mind in a very respectful way. And thereafter, if I think there's one that's been destructive, I won't talk to them in the group of everybody. Put them to the side and have one-on-one conversation with them. So with all this presentation, probably tells me that they could be operating from a different point of view. And if you meet them at that same point of view, you're not going to get any good results. So if you have one-on-one with them, you may be able to understand why they are thinking that way and be able to get a better resolution from them. So that's just my comment. And thank you both for the excellent presentation and for reminding us of why we need to do this. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Any final questions or thoughts? Anything you want to share with the group based on our conversation? Okay.
I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar, and hopefully we will see you again at the next webinar, and that you listen to our podcast. And if you didn't get a chance to complete the survey via the QR code, you'll be receiving an email with a link to the survey as well. So that'll help us very much in planning the next our next offerings.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you so much, Colin.
And I would just add, like, CPCN, I'm currently the chair, but we're really interested in what you want to hear about. So it's one thing for us to imagine the topics that would be of interest to CSPL members, but if you give us direct feedback and tell us, I'm really interested in this, we're definitely open to those suggestions.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and for listening.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Colin.
Everybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.